Zeno Rogue joining us, a hardcore roguelike enthusiast and one of the developers on one I played years ago, Ancient Domains of Mystery. So excited to hear what they have for the best genre for a non-Euclidean game, because I also enjoy non-Euclideanness. So with that, I'll let you take it away, Zeno Rogue.
Okay, so thanks for introduction. So we'll be talking about non-Euclidean games, right? So let's start with explaining what non-Euclidean geometry actually is. Okay, so non-Euclidean is actually a quite commonly used word. And people use this word using many different things which are somehow conflicting. I don't want to talk about these interpretations because they are basically all wrong, and what actually non-Euclidean geometry is colder than that. Okay, so what non-Euclidean geometry is? So let us look at the screenshot of Rogue. So what kind of shapes do we see in Rogue? And it is one shape that is basically the most common here. So it is the rectangle, right? So we have rooms which are rectangles. Rogue is played on a square grid, so the grid ties are also rectangles. Also, the whole level is placed on a plan of rectangle. And now the question is, are the rectangles even real? In Rogue everything is rectangle, but do the rectangles actually exist? So yes, it might look something obvious, like that rectangles do exist, but it was not actually that obvious. So what does a rectangle actually mean, right? So a rectangle is a shape that has 4 right angles and 4 straight edges, exactly right angles, exactly straight edges. So that is maybe a bit more weird shape. And this question basically came up in the work of Euclid. So what Euclid did was he wanted to systematize all the knowledge of geometry at his time. So his idea was to introduce the modern way of doing mathematics. So he started with a very simple statement and proved more and more complex statements from this. And he wanted to apply this approach to geometry. So he said first to 4 postulates, which are very simple statements, like the space should be the same everywhere and in every direction. And from these 4 postulates, he couldn't still prove some things, like, for example, that the rectangles exist. So what Euclid did is that he added this postulate, also known as parallel postulate, which basically says that rectangles do exist, right? So he didn't formulate it this way, but he considers something else simpler. I think, in my opinion, the existence of rectangles is like the most special things, right? So rectangles do exist in Euclidean geometry; they do not exist in non-Euclidean geometry, and so the original non-Euclidean geometry, original meaning of non-Euclidean geometry is that postulates 1 to 4 are all true, but still rectangles do not exist. Okay, so maybe let's how could it even happen that rectangles do not exist? So let's suppose we are making a roguelike on a sphere, right? So we could look like this. So we have a sphere, we have something which looks a bit like a square grid, but if you look at it, it's not actually squares, right? So yes, so it's the most visible if you look at the poles, right? So here we see that these vertical edges, northern and southern edges, are not actually straight lines. They are more like curves. They are circular arcs. It is the most visible close to the pole. Okay, and like a sphere is an example of a space which is also the same at every point and in every direction, but here rectangles do not actually exist. It didn't actually like satisfy like all of the four postulates of Euclid. It depends a bit on the details how they define them, but it was not like the answer to the question, like the original Euclidean geometry. But it's a good way to introduce it, right? So we have hyperbolic geometry, which is the original Euclidean geometry, and it is basically the opposite of spherical geometry, right? So it is spherical geometry changes the geometry in some way, and hyperbolic geometry does the opposite. And what do I mean by doing the opposite? So here is the Euclidean plane. This time it is using hexagons, hexagonal grid, to make it a bit closer to HyperRogue. So you can see lots of hexagons here. We could also have rectangles here, but you could draw rectangles on this board because it's still Euclidean geometry. But here we only show hexagons. And now what to make spherical geometry out of this? We can replace some of these hexagons with pentagons, right? So we do get this soccer ball, and it is a good approximation of spherical geometry. And if you want to obtain hyperbolic geometry, we do the opposite, right? So replace these hexagons with heptagons. So you could actually do something like this in our real world. We would try to do this, right? So you would get a structure like this. It's actually infinite, so it won't fit. We won't fit too much of it in our world. Yes, and so what I show here is not like a good way to, for example, play games or for mathematical modeling. So what is normally done for hyperbolic geometry is that we use projections, right? So here is the like most commonly used projection called Poincaré disk. It is a bit, it could be said to be a bit similar to the Mercator projection, right? So when we show a map of Earth, you can use, for example, Mercator projection, which is quite nice because it changes the relative scales of things, but the shapes are correct. And this Poincaré disk shown here also has this property that it changes the scales of the things. So all of these heptagons you see on the screen here are actually of the same size, but they look like normal heptagons because the shapes are correct. Shapes and angles are mostly correct. Okay, so this was like two-dimensional hyperbolic geometry. We can also have three-dimensional hyperbolic geometry. So this is, for example, an example of a three-dimensional hyperbolic honeycomb. So it looks a bit like Minecraft, right? You have these cubes, but they are like hyperbolic cubes. They are not actually cubes, as Lovecraft said in Call of Cthulhu. The angles are all wrong, right? So, for example, the angles here are not 19 degrees; they are 72 degrees, and 5 of them fit around every edge. So it's like a weird things. Okay, so that's an introduction to hyperbolic geometry. Now let's move to the history of HyperRogue. I learned about hyperbolic geometry in '98 in a kind of course that did show like a video, not, which was a simulation of three-dimensional hyperbolic geometry. It looked a bit like what I'm showing on the screen here. And I wanted to make a hyperbolic game. I wanted to make it like something like a first-person shooter, but I didn't really know how to do hyperbolic geometry. I didn't know how to make games, so I didn't do much in this idea. Then I tried to drawing some hyperbolic art. It looks like a bit like this, not exactly what I'm showing on the screen, but it looks similar. It was quite complicated. Then I learned some fun stuff. So I learned about the hyperbolic model. So this is like a very nice model for doing hyperbolic geometry on a computer. It is quite similar to what you would do if you would be doing spherical geometry. Also, if you are doing like a 3D engine for Euclidean geometry, this is also quite similar in the idea, this homogeneous coordinates and so on. Then I learned about this hyperbolic soccer ball tessellation. So, and I realized that this tessellation was seemed to be quite good to make a roguelike on, right? So before that, I learned about, I only knew about tessellation like this, which had only these heptagons, and these heptagons are like too large, right? So you can only see four steps, right? So I thought it was not enough for making a cool roguelike. But with this styling, it looked great for a roguelike actually. So I basically made it. So it looked like this, the first version. So we travel on this hyperbolic plane. We collect some treasures and we also get attacked by monsters. You kill this monster in one hit, like this. They could also kill me in one hit, so it's like balanced. Yes, and I found this. This was I planned more stuff in this, but I invented this very simple game and found it very cool and just released it, and people also liked it very much, quite surprisingly. So this was the first version of HyperRogue. And then for the IRL in 2012, I wanted to make something bigger from this prototype. So what I did was this. To add multiple lands, right? So we not only had this Iceland that I did show before, but we have other lands with different rules. And then also graphics were added, music. Then in 2015, HyperRogue was released on Steam, so it was quite important because like a community was for this game was built on this Steam forums. Nowadays, a good space for making communities is Discord, but we didn't have Discord then, right? So it was quite important. We have the community. They suggested ideas for improvements and so on. Also in 2015, I met my wife, so she had an idea to use this engine not only for a roguelike but also for doing some like research using hyperbolic geometry, right? So it was quite fun, and some of the things which we did for this research were also used back in the game, right? So it was quite interesting. Then three-dimensional graphics, animations, some like special modes, three-dimensional graphics here. So you can play HyperRogue like a first-person shooter. There are also full three-dimensional geometries. So like this thing with hyperbolic cubes was also done with this engine. Some alternative classes like crossbow and so on. So that's now HyperRogue has like over 60 lands. So that's roughly the history of HyperRogue. So let's move to the main thing of the attack. So So it seems that roguelikes and hyperbolic geometry are a great match, right? So yes, so it is so. So which roguelikes elements did actually matter for HyperRogue? So quite interestingly, the thing which matters the most is, in my idea, is that you actually move and fight like in Rogue. So let's explain why is it so, why hyperbolic geometry matters here. So let's collect this treasure here, and now we are attacked by two monsters, and if we're on a hex grid, it wouldn't be possible to like win this situation, right? Because if you attacked on one of them, the other one would attack us, and if we try to escape, they are still both close to us. But this is hyperbolic geometry, so we can actually stand on the heptagon, and this heptagon has this extra direction that Euclidean geometry didn't have. So we step here and we can defeat them. So that's this seems to be what actually makes this game like cool. And another very important thing is, which I have not talked about yet, is that is this thing, right? So let's count how many cells we have by distance. So for example, if we look at how many cells we have in, for example, 50 tiles, it is like 3.5 trillions, right? So it grows very, very fast. It actually grows exponentially, right? So there are sometimes you can find on internet some videos about what are the biggest games ever, biggest game worlds. So they are normally mention something like No Man's Sky or something which models a galaxy which has like I guess I don't remember. I think about 20 digits is the size of the universe here there, and HyperRogue is basically these guys are basically laughably small compared to HyperRogue, right? Because of this exponential growth, and of course since we have this infinite world, procedural generation is crucial. So that's important thing. This is also this infinite growth is also what is used in this scientific application that I mentioned. One other fun things is that in HyperRogue there is no need to auto travel, right? So this is this controversy in traditional roguelikes that there is this they commonly have this auto travel feature, which makes the game more fun, but it is controversial, right? So some people don't like it very much, and here in HyperRogue, due to this structure, it doesn't feel like it would be better if you had auto travel. And so HyperRogue has not only combat challenges which I did show before, but also navigation challenges. Like find like some specific points in this huge world. Okay, so before we move to the next step, so what do we have now? We have procedural generation, and we have this extremely cool exploration combat system, and how to make it a really great game. And roguish games used like two kinds of approach, right? So roguelikes are like commonly associated with mastery, so the game should be a challenge. But we also have simulationism, right? So the idea here is to simulate an immersive complex world, and they are like very different approaches, right? So for example, these mastery games, we prefer more linear structure to prevent grinding. We want shorter runs, medium complexity. In simulationist games, there is lots of complexity, more experimentation, and like lots of games are based on this simulationist approach. So for me as a game designer, I am more into this like mastery direction. So I want this to be. I want the game to be like a challenge. I don't like grinding, for example, but this infinite world is like a great match to have. Yes, for like it's infinite world, right? So it's so I wanted to have something which makes this this mastery work in a world which is actually infinite. So yes. So the idea here is that we collect these treasures, which gives us score, and when we get more score, the game becomes harder, right? So here we have, like, I don't know how many ice diamonds we have from this island, but it makes this island quite difficult. If we move to another land, it is still at 0, so it will be still easy. Also, these high scores unlock stuff, so that's how it works. So it's not like a simulationist game similar to like Dwarf Fortress or Caves of Quad, but it's still kind of simulationist because it simulates complex mathematics, right? So it's a kind of different kind of simulation. Now let's talk about what HyperRogue doesn't have. So as I did show before, HyperRogue has no hit points, right? It also has no character growth. So some people think that roguelikes are defined by character growth, but here it is not really character growth. There is no resource management. There are no classes, at least originally. It is still an adventure, so this makes it a bit like a role-playing game. But on the other hand, everything of this is like there's some take on it. So, for example, there is no hit points, but I have seen like an interpretation of hit points, which according to which hit points are the idea of hit points is that they don't actually correspond to being unwounded hard, but to like general state, which includes, for example, tactical positioning and in this tactical roguelikes, one hit point roguelikes, this positioning is like explicit, right? So it replaces the character doesn't grow, but the world gets advanced, gets progression. So this like some players say something like this, and I think this is a nice way to doing this. There are no classes, but HyperRogue takes variety from having lots of special modes. Like, for example, you can play this game on some different tiling, right? So here is, for example, a different tiling. So the procedural generation in HyperRogue has been transformed to also work on many other tilings. Okay. There is also this org strategy mode, which makes it more like a role-playing game. So it is also this more like a more typical roguelike in general. The next thing I wanted to talk about is special consistency. So what I mean by special consistency, also called non-modality, is that this space is consistent, right? So for example, in NetHack shops, we have these shops are basically a part of the map, and we can do lots of cool things based on that, like steal from shops and things like that. There are many violations of, for example, in roguelikes we often have stairs, which are a kind of violation of this special consistency because it is not clear whether the enemies should follow you through the stairs or not, right? So there is like we're stuff here, and here non-Euclidean geometry allows us to have this special consistency in a fun way. So we have this hyperbolic strings like here, and they allow us to have like a new structure of the word, right? Which is especially consistent. So I think that is quite fun. The next element is simple graphics. So as I have shown before, the first version HyperRogue was ASCII, so it was good for prototyping. So I could make this ASCII game, and people did buy it. And the common way that developers use is pixel art, right? But here, in my opinion, pixel art doesn't fit non-Euclidean geometry because pixels are squares, and as I said, in hyperbolic geometry, there are no squares, there are no rectangles. So this pixel art would have to be weirdly like reshaped or zoomed and so on. So it doesn't fit. You also need to anyway write some kind of engine for this, right? So common approaches don't really work. The next thing I wanted to show is this screenshot of the first roguelike which I have played, which was named Valhalla. So I think this screenshot is quite interesting because this has this zoomed in map in the lower part of the screen, and on the upper part of the screen it has the map of the whole level, which is like a big, right? And it seems that in roguelikes, when I am playing roguelikes, I want to indeed like this screenshot shows see the whole level, right? And I think other players are also like me often. And at some point, I had an idea that maybe it would be possible to combine these two views that Valhalla uses into one view, right? So something which shows my character zoomed in, but I can also see the bigger part of the level. And this Pancare disk basically lets us to get this effect, right? So I would like to also mention that Pancare disk is not the only projection. There are also other projections, like so for example, some people prefer to play HyperRogue like this. There are many projections. Okay, so next thing is I would like to mention this great community. So who like experimental games, accept low production values, suggests improvements, contributes code assets and so on. So I think it is easier for experimental games. It's easier to like market them if they are roguelikes than if they are not. If they are not, it's not clear how to find like a community of players. Okay, so there's also permanent devs. So it is quite relevant to HyperRogue, but it's not really relevant to non-Euclidean geometry. So and I have no time to talk about this. So I will skip this. I will talk about some examples of other non-Euclidean game projects which we have. So we have hyperbolic versions of various puzzles, so like Sokoban or Minesweeper or Sudoku, Rubik's Cube and so on. We have Hyperbolica, which is quite a big hyperbolic game. It is a working simulator with some mini games essentially. There is this Hypermine project, which is the idea here is to make hyperbolic Minecraft, right? So it's also procedurally generated, of course, and it is also open source, so possible. It could be possible to join this project. There is this in-house game, which is like a game in development. I find it quite interesting because it's also a top-down two-dimensional action game, but like they made very different choices than I made in HyperRogue, so it's quite interesting. There is Rogue's collection, which is like a collection of games in various tertone geometries. So right, so we have in 3D we have even more wilder geometries, which are called tertone geometries. There is our Metroidvania, which which is also non-Euclidean and is in development. The idea here is to make as many roguelike elements as possible without the most common ones. So, for example, no procedural generation. So let's see what it will result. We have also started writing a book about making Euclidean games. So this could be interesting if you want to make a game of your own. So that's all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zeno Rogue. And what's the name of your Metroidvania? I didn't see it on there. Or is that in progress?
So it's not really named.
Okay.
I mean, I have some like development names, but they could switch. So
sure. Well, I'm excited.
You can follow me on social media. Probably will
sounds
show
good.
it from time to time.